All right, so it's the Dave and Deanne show again for you today. What we're going to do is we have a fairly short presentation on the slides to give you a little bit of an update, and then we wanted to make sure that we had plenty of time for a regular town hall style with open questions. And so timing here, maybe 15 minutes for the presentation, unless we start talking, I don't know. And then 45 minutes or so for open town hall, and we'll see how it goes, because we really want to honor your time and not go over about an hour, if that's okay. Kevin, go ahead. We don't have a script this time. This is just utilizing the slide. No, that's a good thing, I think. All right, I'll take this one since it's my realm.
It's your turn.
It's my turn to talk. Okay. One of the things that we've modified in the last, 3 weeks, months, so, is that we've got a formalized communication plan. And we wanted to make sure that the congregation was hearing more information because there was a lot going on. And so what we've got are weekly updates, we've got town halls, we have emails going out, we have a web page that includes videos, survey report, scorecards, and a Q&A section. So if you are not receiving information about these, then you need to let us know or let Nicole Presley or Jessica Seals know, and we can make sure that you're on the email list, that you're getting regular updates on that. Kevin, go ahead. Next slide. We'll let you have that one.
Our friend Kensington. We've withdrawn Kensington from consideration, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. You may or may not recall that we sent a letter of intent out on October 30th, and during that period of time, we did as much due diligence as we could without it being under contract. So we did some preliminary property inspections. We analyzed the way the property was generating income and what the potential was for the income down the road. And we also asked CDH Partners, the architect that's working for us, to do a preliminary design. So let me just say something here for my friends in the audience who are architects and engineers. What I'm going to talk about has nothing to do with the structural integrity of the building, the chance of it lasting another 30 or 40 years. That was not part of what we analyzed. What we looked at was what we would have to do to keep the property in reasonable condition over a 10-year period so that we could keep getting people to pay rent. Building currently is 43 years old and needs upgrading. When I looked at what's known as tenant improvements, which is basically what you do to the inside of the building when somebody moves in or somebody renews a lease, is carpet and drapes. Where did that come from? Is paint, carpet, maybe some arranging of the odd walls. Does that sound about right? Yeah. Nothing was looked at in terms of putting exterior cladding on the buildings, replacing the, I don't know how many air conditioners are on the roof that are quite old, and a lot of other things. When I put the analysis together, the only thing that I added to the cost of keeping a place alive was to try to make it somewhat more handicap friendly by putting in elevators in the buildings. So at the end of the 10 years, we would have 3 buildings with 3 new elevators and nothing else done outside, 10 years old. So now we would have 53-year-old buildings. The cost of keeping that place alive for 10 years is well over $2 million. We could not generate that much cash flow from the leasing rates based on our analysis of the way the property is inhabited now. In addition to that, we got a design from CDH. We got 2 designs. One design was for $4 million and didn't take into account a whole bunch of the renovations. The other design was so high that they didn't even quote a price on it. Am I right? Yeah. Right. So taking all those things into consideration as if we were in a vacuum, right? If I was representing an investor, I would have said no anyhow. So we talked about it, and we considered, you know, all the wonderful things that were about it, and we decided that it's not something that this congregation could afford to keep, to own and to keep for the long term. Now, there is another place.
Let me just add one more thing on the Kensington properties, because one of the benefits that we were considering was to be able to have outside income coming in off of the rental properties. That was one of its primary selling points, and that's what the analysis did. That's the cut to the chase here, is that we were hoping that we would make income and know it was going to be a net loss even over a 10-year period. So that was the primary decision to not do it. So while we're engrossed in that, go ahead, Kevin, next slide. We found out about another property. We'll take questions here at the end of this, okay? Hold that. And we can go back to a slide if you need to. So we got another property that came into the picture, and it's called Stillwater's Methodist Church on Druid Hills. And this is, well, Dave, I'm going to let you add the details. Go ahead. Oh. All right, it's a, the cost is just above $6 million. It's a multi-building complex. It has a sanctuary that holds about 270 people. It has 4.9 acres. It's on North Druid Hills. And it has a parking lot of about 80, so there's a little issue there. And the board voted to submit an LOI on December 14th for that property. That is still pending. We have not heard anything back on that LOI, because that was just Thursday, Friday. Submitted on Thursday for a deadline on Friday. Yes.
So if you think your board and your project leaders look harried, there's actually a legitimate reason. This is like pretty wild. So here's sort of the benefits and the drawbacks, just at a very broad strokes. There are many more benefits, and there are, I'm sure, other drawbacks too. It's not real far from here. It's between Briarcliff and La Vista. And obviously, North Druid Hills is a high-volume road, which means a lot of people could see it. Could be move-in ready is pretty optimistic, but there are things that can be done to make it move-in ready easily. It's got a fairly large social hall, which is already plumbed and sprinklered with a commercial vent hood, so it could be a commercial kitchen should we decide to do that. There's a really nice area available in the back in a glade for a memorial garden. And it's almost 5 acres, so obviously we would need to put we're going to have to pave Paradise a little bit, and over time put in a new sanctuary. Now, what's the problems? Well, all that wonderful drive-by traffic is the traffic that you have to get into and out of there's 2 entrances, fortunately. The parking lot, small. There's no elevators and there's no ramps to be accessible. And we're competing. We're competing with, last I heard, 7 developers and 1 other end user. So as we've been saying for months, the market's nuts. It may be calming down because they may be starting to restrict the number of buildings you can put on property in Druid Hills. And they may be even shutting some of it down, but we don't know for sure. We haven't gotten a definitive answer on that. And there's only a 270-seat sanctuary if we can figure out a good way to do it, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So anyhow, here's kind of sort of the way it looks. Up there is the entrance to the sanctuary, is the thing with the peaked roof. And there's a 2-story building that's literally attached to it. You go through a hallway. You go through it through the inside. That's sort of like what the lobby, okay? I'm sorry? the narthex. If you're Jewish, it's a lobby. And and then I tried to do sort of a beater panorama of the way the sanctuary, thank you, it looks. So that's sort of left to right. And as you can see, there's no pews left in there. That's the middle, and that's a piece of stained glass, which is not, is it incredibly Christian? I can't remember anymore. So, but that's the only thing. That's the only piece of what we call it, iconography, that's in there. And then there's another wing to the right, and this is as is. Okay? Now we come to the legendary John Duggar solution. And the John Duggar solution gives us 274-ish. So, you know, somewhere between 240 and 800, I guess. And basically, I'm using John's design because he's an incredibly clever guy that really thinks outside the box. So basically, what you're looking at, the top of the screen is where that piece of stained glass is, and where the traditional sort of pulpit, etc. place. Bema? The Bema, that's right. The Bema is going to be where the Bema belongs, in the middle, actually. Anyhow, that's up there. There's chairs on the side, and there's a choir area in the back. And you see that tiny little dot sort of in between? That's where the minister is. But now, let's not get nuts here. This is just an idea, a way that it can be approached. 5 architects, 5 solutions, or maybe even 7 or 10. 10 solutions? 5, yep, the architect said 5 architects, 10 solutions. Okay, so again, church, 2-story education building, or what was the 2-story education building, narthex lobby, 3 interior shots of the place. And yeah, we know that there are chandeliers that would have to go. It's not our style. Next, then the John Duggar solution, one of probably 15 that are being immediately thought of in this room right now, but I thought quite clever myself. And then the next slide, top left, commercial kitchen vent, including those, must be about this big vent and I guess smoke suppression things on the outside of the building. So it could be used for that. It's 3 times the size of ours, 4 times the size of ours. It's really big. And then next to that, at the top right, is what would more than likely become the social hall. What you can't see in the pictures is off on the right, those little tables. They chopped up some pews and made a cafe kind of a thing out of it. That's sort of like what one of the classrooms looks like, with yeah, the bottom left is with a screen divider, and then that really terrible picture is one of the 2 playgrounds that exist. Okay, so that's Stillwater in a nutshell. Okay, your turn.
Next slide. All right, considering that we are in a competitive market with Stillwaters, we really have to have an alternative plan ready to go for us, and that would be leasing. And leasing for us, the advantage that it has, of course, it buys us time so that we don't, get into a situation that is untenable for us. The drawbacks of leasing, of course, would be cost us about $30,000 a month to be able to lease. We would need to lease office space and sanctuary space. There's a potential that we could rent a DeKalb County School District auditorium for services, and those come fairly inexpensive on Sundays. It decreases our working capital each year that we lease because it's $30,000 a month. It would mean that we would need to move at least twice, and that we would probably need to store items. We would have to develop some form of triage Is it worth the storage cost for some of the things that we have or not? So there would be a great deal of figuring out what we can keep and what we should garage sale, there's Jackie, and or just give it to Restore or the dumpster, whichever we need to do. So that's the other thing that we are currently in pursuit of our leasing options.
So a couple of other things. One is, although it's not obvious, we are still continuously looking for other places. I don't know how well it's going to go, but I'm still optimistic. The developers are now starting to get turned down for smaller projects because they're trying to get into nicer neighborhoods, and the neighbors don't want another 12 or 14 or 16 unit townhouse. What is it, 16 per acre? 12 per acre. 12 per acre. So you get another 60 townhouses and the 120 cars and all that other stuff. So I'm encouraged by that. The other thing is, if by some wonderfulness we do happen to get our letter of intent approved by Stillwater's, we're talking about a fairly long process. So we're going to have to be looking for leasing space, and we're going to have to continue to look for other things as we go. So we're not putting all our eggs in one basket. But if you're into like lighting candles or praying or davening or whatever you want to do, it doesn't wait. And I think on that note, we'll open for questions.
And we have Tucker running the microphones for us so that all of this is recorded, because we are on video and audio, so that it can be posted to the website. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and Tucker will do his best to get it. We got Sven right behind you there, Tucker.
This idea came up in an earlier conversation. That is, what as far as leasing, have we considered sharing a church space with anyone else, including Northwest, and meeting in the afternoon or something as opposed to when they meet?
Yes, we've considered it. The logistics become very tricky, and we will. We're going to write that one down. June's got that one being written down because we're going to add these to the Q&A, and let's come up with a better answer than me standing here trying to do that. Okay? And so yes, we will consider that.
My question's very quick and short. Is this church DeKalb County, or is it City of Brookhaven?
It's DeKalb County. Ed's right behind you there. Bob?
Do we know the time frame for Children's Healthcare of Atlanta knocking this building down, and is there a possibility that we can rent until we go into our location from Children's Healthcare?
We officially, at this point, have a September 15th deadline to be out of here, 2018, to be out of here.
You think it's going to be knocked down on the 19th? I mean, is there any possibility?
The question was, do we think that it's going to be knocked down on the 19th? No, but that's not necessarily an option that we can have. Now, given the moving and so forth, Carol Ann, you want it? Give microphone to Carol Ann to finish this answer. Just pass your microphone over there to Carol Ann for a minute. Let her finish this.
There's a provision in our purchase and sale agreement that opens the door, albeit very slightly, for us to continue to stay here beyond the September 15th deadline. However, to do so, we would have to pay CHOA $45,000 a month to do so. So it would not come without cost. So I just put that out there. We don't know their demolition time frame, but even if we were to stay here, it cost us that.
And there's more to it than just demolition. I suspect that this is one of the parking lots going to become a construction equipment staging site. So,
after the LOI, you then discovered that the property would not fit our needs, Kensington. Do you anticipate that before the LOI and everything went out on the city?
no, we could not have gotten our hands on a reasonable rent roll or gotten inside for a fairly conclusive, not conclusive, but a fairly careful investigation by people who do these kinds of things. So, no, you always got to, actually, many times LOIs aren't enough to get in other than for like a preliminary look.
I just want to pick up on a couple of points that have been made before and also that I mentioned during our congregational meeting last week. And I want to, first of all, start out with the comment about reducing our working capital if we rent. I mean, again, I don't really think that it has to be that way. We're talking about an $8 million asset that we're sitting on now. If we invested that even modestly at 3 or 4%, and yes, I know interest rates on cash accounts are substantially less than that, so I understand that. But we've got a lot of very smart people in this congregation who have experience in financial management. I bet you that we could come up with some reasonably conservative management strategies that wouldn't require us to dip into the $8 million, still generate enough money that we could potentially cover the cost of rent. And as far as Carol Ann's comment about $45,000, I mean, that actually strikes me as kind of a bargain. If we're talking about $30,000 rent to go to another space, whether it's a school or something like that, and then having to rent office space in addition to that, I mean, that could easily come to $45,000 too, and we wouldn't have the hassle of moving. So it just seems like we've got some contingencies or some options here if Stillwater doesn't work out. Can you comment on that a little bit, please?
Erin's going to comment.
Does she have a microphone? No. Yes. Yes. First point about being able to invest to $8 million, although being able to make $30,000 a month that is one heck of an investment tool. I want to know about that one. And secondly, yes, the $45,000 a month, but it takes special dispensation from CHOA for us to be able to do it. It's completely at their discretion, and so we would have to go back to the negotiating table to do that. Yes, the $45,000 might be better than $30,000 because we don't move twice, so we save some moving costs. Yes, that's why it's being evaluated. It's part of the system, part of the things that Carol Ann and the board are all working on. Yes.
Yeah. And it also depends on what the situation is. If it's such that we have a place under contract and we're just moving as fast as we can to make it livable, well, then the $45,000 becomes tenable for, like a 3 or 4 or 5 months kind of a thing. In terms of, is Bill Kramer here somewhere? Bill, can you address the other thing about the investment part? You'll do it better than me.
The microphone is here because I was going to ask about rental and the memorial garden.
Okay, well, I just want to get this one thing wrapped up and then here. Thanks.
Recently appointed finance trustee.
Welcome.
As a disclaimer, I was not on the board or part of the negotiations and discussions when the building was sold and the choice of financial investments were decided. However, my understanding is we need to keep this money liquid, and a lot of investments require tying up the money for quite a while. It might seem like a 6-month process once we agree on a property, but we need that money to move right away. So we live in a world where we're one tweet away from the stock market collapsing. So I like to think about this. This is not money we inherited from our grandmother that we can be risky with. This is our Social Security that we're living off of. Mm-hmm. So yes, we have looked at before options to be more aggressive in our investments, but what we're doing now is very conservative, and we have to stay conservative because we represent the entire congregation. So we thought about it, we really have, but we need to be able to act. The fact that we had to get this letter in, the day before the bids, we had very little time to actually get that together. That's how fast things are working. So if something was successful, that money might have to go out very quickly. So we are considering that, we are aware, we do evaluate, and if the situation changes where we are suddenly renting or not moving on a different timetable, we'll reevaluate it, but we're not in the near term looking to change that just because we have to keep it liquid.
Thanks. Karen?
If we have to rent space and we have to do 2 moves because of that, what happens to the Memorial Garden?
We're working with Fisher Funeral Care, which is the same funeral care company that works with the Memorial Society. And they have agreed to work with us, including relocating to their facility until we have space for us. So yes, there's a team that's working on that. So that's a good deal for us. We haven't talked about cost,
My
but
next
that's
question.
pending next. That's the next part of this, but we do have a commitment to help us out with the Memorial Garden.
Could you clarify, I think there is next to the sanctuary a 2-story education building, I think you mentioned, and can that be used to generate income? Can we rent out part of it?
At some point, sure, just like here. I mean, during the week, those rooms are going to be vacant, basically vacant, and it was a school when Stillwater's had it, so yes.
Yeah, it would be in a different way than what we were thinking for Kensington, where we would be leasing to architects and engineers and all of other kinds of businesses, maybe social justice based. Whereas here it's schools and more small volume kind of things.
I totally disagree with Bill on how to handle these funds. This is a huge windfall to us while it's still liquid. And to just tuck it away and get 0.15% or something per year is foolish. There are many ways to invest this that are at least as safe as some of these banks that also fail. One of those is by investing those funds which are not required to immediately flow out from us. In other words, if we paid 6.25 from that for that North Druid Hills Church, there's over $2 million that is sitting there. And $2 million, anyone can make 6% on that by very safe investments. So there we are, $120,000. Even if it's only for 6 months, $60,000. Should we really be turning that down? I think that's what I think is foolish, not not this idea that there's something threatening about investments. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm trying to, where's the other microphone?
Over here.
Okay, we want to get a response. Tucker, can you get it back down here to Carol Ann, too? I love bossing him around with a microphone. Woohoo!
Okay, I just wanted to share, because I was on part of the finance committee and the team that did analyze, where should we put the money when we did it. And this wasn't just a bunch of UU sitting around the room thinking, hey, let's do this, it sounds safe. We put it out to 2 financial advisors who, this is what they do. Their business is telling people what's the best way to invest your money, given your objectives. And the objectives we gave them, as Bill alluded to, was liquidity, because we don't know when we're going to buy and we may need to draw it down really fast. Security, because this is the church's principle and we don't want to be losing it. And return. Return was like number 3 on the list. Oh, I guess really number 3 was investing it with people we could trust and in instruments we could trust. And then number 4 was return. Return was really number 4 on the list. So I agree that there are higher yields out there. The problem, and this is something we discovered in our process, the problem is those yields that are maybe available to individuals are not available to institutions. There's a whole different way things, work as to what kind of funds institutions can be in instead of individuals. So it's very possible you see a great yield out there that you as an investor could get, buying a CD or doing something else. It's not available to the church as an institution. So we're at this point in time, we're still holding to those 4 objectives in that order. We will revisit certainly once it becomes clear whether we need to draw down another 6 million or 6 million or whatever for Stillwater's, but at this point in time, our advisor has not contacted us and said, hey, there's this great new instrument out there that, you know, would give you guys a higher yield. And I trust this advisor, and so we're gonna follow their lead to alert us when something bigger and better that would work for us comes along. Thank you.
John, go ahead.
Well, speaking of making money, we had an incentive, or have incentives, I believe, to move out early. Could you review what those incentives are and what are the real, is that realistic or not realistic at this point, in your opinion?
The incentive is $45,000 a month for moving out 7 months earlier or later. If we were to get involved with the Stillwater thing, we'd be good to get out on time if we have to go to June. So
what about leasing?
It may exist later, but at the moment, I live in the worst. Murphy's Law has always applied to me. If something bad can happen, it will. And so I live. I believe in talking about the worst case. Okay, the worst case is we don't get any money. The best case is something miraculous happens and Stillwater's comes to us and we close in early May and we do some sort of phenomenal job of getting out of here and we get July, August, and September. So that would be $135,000.
Microphone, please.
2 questions, if you permit. One, for the last many years, we've had within our operating budget a cost of this building. We have mortgage, we have utilities, we have grounds and maintenance and building maintenance, building attendance and so forth. So how did those costs, traditional right up until this past fiscal year, compare to the $30,000 a month that would be the cost of it, or $45,000? And that's the one question. And the other is, if we're looking at these DeKalb County school places, would that also include possibilities of classrooms?
I cannot pull from the top of my head the actual building costs. We're going to take that one into the Q&A and provide a written answer on that one so that we don't say the wrong numbers here.
But I can give a partial
because,
answer.
I mean, Jane Price would be the one who could probably pull that one off the top of her head, and she's not here for this. And so we'll put that one up on the Q&A, Ellen. Second part, yes, there's the potential to rent classrooms from the schools. They rent everything from a school as a possibility, and there's different costs for different parts. Typically, there's a 3 to 4 hour maximum because they have to have a custodian come to open the facility and clean up after us. But it would run us about $300 a month? Yes, a Sunday. $300 a Sunday, $300 a Sunday to be able to rent an auditorium and some classroom space from them.
So, and there's
Yes,
a little bit more to that, which is when we're talking about the $30,000 a month, that's what they call a gross lease. And so what we would not be paying, we'd not be paying maintenance, we'd not be paying, well, we don't never pay taxes, and we would not be paying insurance. Those are the big 3 that come with a gross lease. Some of them even include custodial services. So a lot of that gets absorbed. Jim.
Why didn't we plan ahead when it's obvious we didn't have a place to move to months ago and plan to rent then?
I'm confused as to...
And plan to get out of here in time to collect the bonus.
Because we're rent-free right now.
We won't be once we
Understood.
get into the 7-month period.
But we're not paying anything right now, and that's the best place to be. Okay? And even if we make Stillwater's work here, okay? If we even make Stillwater's work, we have at least 90 days, potentially 6 months of due diligence for us to make sure that that's the right place for us in the land of real estate. Yeah. So we have that due diligence time period, and then the month after that would be closing. It's January. So planning ahead, we didn't have any place to plan ahead to go to, even with leasing. You wanted to find a permanent place, right?
No, I want the extra money that we get from moving out early. That's what I really want. And I think if we had planned ahead, we could have been out of here and gotten that money and still made a
Agreed.
profit.
And then hang on. If we lease, we move twice. Yeah. And we sort things out. That kind of net washes early money.
Okay, thank you.
Have we considered renting a space at a synagogue on an
Yes.
interim basis? Because that would likely be available for us on Sundays.
Well, actually, we have, and what you probably don't know about synagogues is Sundays are busy days in the shul. All the stuff that doesn't happen on Saturday, like the religious we would call religious education, the synagogues are jammed on Sundays. But we did think about it. We were hoping somebody wanted to move out, we could just move in. Synagogue is perfect for UUs.
A couple questions. Do we know the age of Stillwater's building? And two, have we considered if it's financially feasible for the Kensington property, because it's half the price of this other one, to raise the buildings and build? I don't know what the estimates were for building, but it sounds like we'd have to build a new sanctuary anyway at Stillwater's.
The answer to the first question is that Stillwater's is 1960s, I think. So. And the answer to the second question is the architects actually included raising one building and building it, and that's how it got the $4 million, absolutely dirt cheapest.
Okay, I've got two questions. Number one, when we were expecting a response to the LOI on Stillwater's, and when are we going to know if we're going to get it? And the second question is, 7 developers wanting it, those aren't good odds. You said we were still searching for other properties. Are there any other properties in the forefront, or are there no good prospects right now?
The projections that we made are based on limiting to 12, right? To 12 townhouses per acre. There are 5 acres, so that's 5 12s or 60, so that's at $500,000 per unit, so that's $30 million, and if you take 20% of the $30 million for land costs, you're at $6 million, and what I know for sure is that the first bid that somehow got let out of the bag was for 4.5, so I'm still optimistic. I wish I had an answer for that. The answer we got from the seller's representative was they're motivated, it's going to happen fast. So it could be this week or it could be next year. I don't know.
One of the advantages that we have is because we are not a developer, and typically when a developer has to do rezoning, they have an 18-month lead time, and we don't have that. We have cash waiting to go as soon as we do our due diligence, and so that can be an advantage. That makes us hopeful. Second question, help me. They're still coming in. I mean, we still get one. My mistake, because I didn't answer his second question, so we'll take that. There's still properties coming in, so there's new information coming in all the time. Go ahead.
What I'd like us to do is think about ways to make our position even more attractive. It is definitely in a competitive environment. We've got advantages, but there's another end user. I'd like us to consider building on any connections we have with the Methodist denomination here in town. I know we participate with them in the Interfaith Children's Movement. I know that we're partnered with them with Snack in a Backpack in Glen. I see over and over where real estate bids that have heart-reaching letters and videos attached often rise to the surface. And I think there are a couple of comments in Facebook that said, you know, we're heathens. You know what, let's not look at it that way. I mean, would they sell to us heathens? That's not the attitude. I think we need to build on a common belief in community and goodwill and everything. And I think there's opportunities to enhance our position as a bidder.
I'm sorry?
That's okay. He's answering.
We actually went with that approach when we first heard that they were moving out in June, I think it was. And basically the response from the UMC, which is the body that holds all the real estate, was, don't bother us. We're going to go for a level playing field. We know you're a church. We're sorry. We'll let you know. And so that's the way that came back. On the other hand, the bid that we put in was really, really aggressive, because unlike the developers who will just go and chase the next deal, they don't get this one, we need to be really assertive about the way we want to approach this. So.
Just one more quick add on that. One of the things they requested in the LOIs was to give some background on who the bidder was. And so we used, yeah, that's what I was trying to tell you. So we use that to our advantage to state that we have been here since the 1800s and we are about social justice and all these sorts of things. So there is a lot of commonality between our vision and the UMC's vision. Just to share, one of the contributing factors in Stillwater's losing their church was that their minister and their congregation would not acknowledge marriage equality. They were still holding to marriage as one man, one woman, and the UMC hierarchy said, that is not our position. You are not in line with UMC. You've lost your franchise to be a UMC congregation. So whereas some of the Baptist churches we were looking at were kind of looking at us like, yeah, I don't know, at least there's some commonality with the UMC, so that gives us some hope. Thank you.
There is a lot of technical stuff going on with this that, thank you for dealing with that, because it's more than anyone can sit on the sidelines and know. So my interest actually is that we take this moment that we have of however many months and use it as a chance to build the health of the congregation. When the Kensington property became visible to everyone and we didn't have all the facts, it became a really contentious discussion, especially on the city. And for my part in that, I apologize if anyone felt just uneasy or unhappy about how that went down. But I think we have a time, whether Stillwater's turns out to be the place or if we have to rent, we should have a stream of this Project Phoenix that is about building consensus. It's going to be very difficult for us to be in a position where we vote 75-25 or 85-15. We should be building consensus and agreement, because we're going to have to compromise. Something about this, whatever they choose, is going to be a problem. There's that perfect vision of what we all want isn't going to exist in the real world, I don't think. And I don't think we have a clear idea of what that common vision really is. We have some data points, but for myself personally, I would really value the chance to sit and discuss all the many things that might come up in the process of moving this building. And I think the listening circles concept and format is good for certain things, like just making sure everyone's voice gets a chance to be heard. But I also think we need some time for small group, meaningful discussion, because I know personally I can change my mind. And I will change my mind a lot more readily if I'm talking to other people and hearing what they have to say.
Thank you. There's another listening circle that's going to happen early next year.
There's a gentleman over here on the mic.
I want to say my thing here. Thank you, Leanne, for the lead-in. I am Kay Johnson. I'm chairman of the celebration committee, which is trying to do that. And we have 5 things going on right now. 4, 5. And you've probably seen a little bit of it going on. One of them is StoryCorps. It's Pasha and Michael Dangerfield and I are taping comments from people about their thoughts about the building, which evidently is very hard for some people to do because they want to tell me about their daughter's wedding. But the building itself, is kind of a part of that memory that, that I'm trying to tease out. And everyone is welcome. We've done it 3 days now, and I have about 15, 20 people who have said things. I'm not being discriminatory. I just haven't run into you in the hallway. So we're going to so we've been attempting to rent the chapel, which is a good place to photograph things, and I'm just dragging people in. But I think starting next year, we'll maybe try some kind of a sign-up sheet or something, so watch for that. Part of the original intention was to get somebody to take video of every building, maybe like a 360 kind of thing of the sanctuary, some kind of pictures of the chapel and, you know, empty and all that. We may actually just stick that onto these StoryCorps thing, and my concept right now of the StoryCorps is a collage of people talking about the sanctuary, the social hall, the chapel, and it's going to be cleverly and professionally put together by Pasha and Michael Dangerfield, I hope. And I have no idea where it's going to be stored, shown, archived. YouTube or Facebook or the city or Google whatever or whatever. In that same line, I'm getting a lot of information from people about boxes of pictures. I have this box of pictures at home in the basement of the building when we built it. I have a box of pictures that my kids took. So we're trying to figure out what to do with that. Have you scan them and send them to us? Send us a box of pictures. So if you have ideas about how to store and we're going to, and you know, we've just voted to pay an archivist for the congregation. So he hasn't been named, she hasn't been named, but I'm hoping to work with them and all the ideas you can bring me about where we store stuff. And we're going to have a party sometime in the spring. Anthony wanted like, is it 66? That was the year the building was born? 66 theme party, maybe with orange clothes or something. And we're going to ceremony and ritualize our leaving the building. And Nina West is in charge of that. If you have ideas, please talk to Nina. What'd she say? Yeah, a jazz funeral. We were thinking more smudging. I don't know. But if you have nice, clever ideas, we're open. So that's how I want, and I think being part of those things helps you be involved in the community of our process.
Thank you. Tucker?
Yeah, so I have a question, and depending on the answer, a second comment. So time and timing is everything in real estate. So this huge master plan by CHOA was supposed to go in front of 2 Brookhaven boards in December for approval. Do we know the outcome of that? Do we know whether this CHOA master plan actually got approved or not?
Apparently it has.
Oh.
Yes, it has.
It passed, okay. So then maybe this second comment may or may not be relevant at this point. So that was where I was hoping that we would still have some leverage, and my idea didn't totally fly with the planning group, but let me share it with the group, because I still think it's, given our limited options, and given that the still waters may not fly, it's something to perhaps still think, because we've got nothing to lose by it. So the idea behind it is that if you take a look, when you drive around Atlanta, what is notable is a huge number of churches that are around, and most of them, again, are really busy, only a few hours a week, okay? This location really is prime real estate in Atlanta, given its ease of access, et cetera. A hospital complex, and I work at CDC, and we have one of these, in general needs a conference center and an auditorium. And that is busy basically Monday through Saturday during the daytime. mostly in the evenings and on Sundays, is totally vacant. And they have parking. And the plan that CHOA has come up for this corner is really impressive in terms of the green space and their eagerness to work with the community to make it a useful property. And so the idea is that we would go with our $8 million and negotiate with CHOA to see if we could come up with a joint tenancy agreement for their conference center, which would include an auditorium and meeting space. And if we don't have any mortgage, then we wouldn't necessarily have the need to have to rent it out for income during the week. So anyway, again, it's a long shot because at this point, since it's been approved, and it's less likely that the board, but we got nothing to lose. We could go back to them and tell them we're a major part of the community, and that was a key thing that they made in their presentations, is how much they want to be part of the community.
Thank you.
So.
Gene hasn't had a chance to ask a question yet, so.
And Bob's got the microphone.
No, so does
Okay.
Tucker.
Do we know from any architects we have in our in our group approximately what is a reasonable price for it to cost to build the new sanctuary that really fits our needs once we get into still waters? I'm assuming we're getting into still
I'll
waters.
tell you again, we'll take 5 architects, we'll get 10 costs.
Yeah. But is the amount
For
of
instance,
money we have a
the
reasonable
sort of
amount?
like the only price that we have right now to build a sanctuary from scratch is about $4 million.
Okay.
It could be less, could be more, depending on if you want a box or something glorious or what have you, Ilse.
Go to Bob.
I
Oh,
just
Bob.
wanted to know very quickly, what is the acreage that we have here, so we have
3.
an idea how it
We have
compares?
3 here, we have 5 there, Bob.
3 acres.
Okay.
I just wanted a point of clarification here. I mean, what I was hearing Leanne say, which I happen to agree with, is that if things don't work out with Stillwater, that it might really be helpful for us to take a step back and really think about what it is we want as a congregation. I mean, we've been doing this to a large degree on the fly, I think, and I don't mean any implied criticism by that. I think we were trying to act quickly and given the opportunity that we saw before us. But maybe there's a silver lining if we find that these properties don't work out, and that we can take a little bit more time to think about what we really want and how we can best execute it. And I think there probably are a lot of options out there that we may not yet have had a chance to consider. Sharing space, I mean, some other things that I think some other people have mentioned in passing here. And as far as the celebration goes, I'm only going to speak for myself and say that it seems awfully premature to me to be talking about a celebration. I mean, I think archiving some of our records and getting all of that together is a wonderful effort, and I certainly support that. But I don't feel particularly celebratory right now. I think we're in a much more contemplative place and trying to really decide on our future. So I guess I'd like to just respectfully suggest that we defer on a celebration until we have a little clearer sense of where we're going.
What you don't see is that there are 30 or 40 people working on all different aspects of this thing. And in response to, I'm not an either-or kind of person. I am a yes-and kind of person. So there's no reason that these things can't be happening concurrently. We just cannot stop looking. We cannot stop planning. The window of opportunity is really getting smaller and smaller. We're going to be down to 8.5 months in another couple of weeks. And we also have to look at what it's going to take to get out of here. It's a pretty massive task. So I don't disagree with what Leanne had to say. I think it's a great idea, and I'm sure it'll happen. Steve.
Let me add to that yes, those are great ideas, and no, Dave and I cannot take on another task.
Oh, no. Yeah, you can wait, your turn.
We got microphones out. Go ahead.
I should go next?
You had it first.
Go ahead, Diane.
The United Methodist sold Simpson Wood Conference Center a couple of years ago, and there was tremendous opposition in the neighborhood against that property being developed. So is there a way that we can use the surrounding whatever homeowners to put pressure on the UMC, and what efforts are, I mean, we have to wait till they accept our LOI, right, before we can really do anything.
Yep. They accept the LOI, they put out a zoning request, and we go and we say no, 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 or we mobilize people to say no, 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 and that's the way I would go about it.
Yes, Dave, use the microphone.
Okay.
We've been here for an hour. I'm going to take two more. Here, Jackie.
Tucker. I'm following up on the celebration. There's all kinds of celebrations. We're not celebrating just leaving the building. And we're having a New Year's Eve party here this year on New Year's Eve, because it will be our last New Year's Eve here, most likely. I think it's a very slim chance everything's going to fall into place. And so we're inviting everybody to come, all of us to come and gather together and have a celebration of each other, a celebration of our relationships, a celebration of what we're going through together, because this is kind of like childbirth. There's an awful lot of pain and everything else with it, but we're all shooting towards a really hopefully wonderful endpoint. So the celebrations are already starting, and it's not celebrating that we're leaving here. We're celebrating our love for each other. So come New Year's Eve, 8:30.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I know that the idea of possibly using a synagogue was, kind of ruled out, but then I looked up real quick about Seventh-day Adventist churches. There's a number of them in the area, and I checked one of the calendars for one of them, and they don't use it on Sunday.
As a lesbian, can't go there.
Just an idea.
Can't go there. I just can't. So we'll take one more question, because Jackie's technically wasn't a question.
One last question? No?
Are we done?
Great.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.